Welcome to the channel. If epic sci-fi stories are your thing, you've just found your new home. Subscribe, like, and share the adventure. The screaming started on day 3. Commander Chris Vell of the Galactic Archaeological Division had excavated ruins on 47 worlds, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for what lay buried beneath the crystalline sands of Kepler 442b. The structure wasn't built. It was grown, its walls pulsing with a bioluminescent network that responded to their presence like a living nervous system. "Ma'am," whispered Technician Reed, his voice barely audible through the The energy readings are impossible. This facility is still drawing power from somewhere. Chris nodded, her scaled hands trembling as she approached the central chamber. The translation matrix had been working overtime since they'd entered, struggling to decode the flowing script that covered every surface. But certain symbols kept, recurring symbols that made her blood run cold. Soul, Terra, human. The extinct species that had supposedly died out 50,000 years ago, victims of their own primitive violence. The textbooks called them a cautionary tale, a race too aggressive to survive their own technological adolescence. Simple creatures who never reached the stars. The textbooks were wrong. The chamber's wall suddenly blazed with light, and holographic displays materialized around them, star charts, technical schematics, and then video recordings. Hundreds of thousands of them. The first image that materialized was of a human child, no more than 6 standard years old, laughing as she fed a creature that Chris recognized as a domesticated Terran canine. The child's eyes sparkled with an emotion that Chris had never seen in any sentient species. Pure, unguarded joy mixed with something deeper, something that made her chest ache. "By the void," Reed whispered. "They're beautiful." They were. Not in the classical sense that the Galactic Council defined beauty: symmetrical features and perfect proportions. These humans were flawed, varied, wonderfully imperfect. But there was something in their expressions, something that reached across 50 millennia and grabbed the very essence of what it meant to be alive. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. HFY Chronicle Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. Next recording showed a human male, elderly and frail, teaching a group of younglings about something called mathematics. His hands shook with age, but his voice carried a passion that transcended species barriers. He was explaining concepts that the Galactic Council's greatest minds had only recently discovered, and he was doing it with simple drawings on a primitive surface. "Commander," Reed's voice was strained. "Look at the date stamps." Chris felt her world tilt. The recordings weren't from the humans' final days of warfare and self-destruction. They were from throughout their history, millions of years of it. Humans working together, building, creating, loving, fighting. Yes, but not in the savage, meaningless way the histories described. They fought to protect, to defend the weak, to stand against injustice even when it meant their own destruction. And the technology, sweet cosmic forces, the technology, hidden beneath layers of primitive-looking devices, were engineering marvels that defied current understanding of physics. These primitive humans had been manipulating quantum fields, folding space-time, creating artificial gravity wells, all while maintaining the facade of a pre-spaceflight civilization. Why? Chris whispered to the empty air. Why hide it all? The answer came in the form of another recording. A human female, her dark skin marked with worry lines, standing before what appeared to be a governing council of her own species. Her words, translated by the Matrix, sent ice through Chris's veins. "The Watchers have made their position clear. Humanity has grown too quickly, learned too much too fast. They fear us, and what they fear, they destroy. So we must become what they expect, a young aggressive species that burns itself out before reaching the stars. We must hide who we truly are, what we've truly achieved, and hope that someday the galaxy will be ready for the truth. The recording ended, leaving them in suffocating silence. Reed's equipment began registering massive power fluctuations throughout the facility. Other chambers were activating, responding to their presence. Centuries of carefully hidden human achievement were awakening around them, and somewhere in the depths of the archive, something that sounded almost like laughter echoed through the crystalline corridors. Dr. Nate Morris had been the Galactic Council's leading xenanthropologist. For 12 years, he'd studied the behavioral patterns of 347 extinct species. But as he descended into the newly discovered lower levels of the human archive, he began to understand that everything he believed about extinction was fundamentally wrong. The humans hadn't died out. They had staged their own disappearance. The evidence was overwhelming, spread across holographic displays that activated at his approach, detailed evacuation plans, genetic preservation protocols, and most disturbing of all, a complete psychological profile of every major Galactic Council species, written with an accuracy that suggested intimate, prolonged observation. "They knew us better than we know ourselves," he whispered, his forearms trembling as he manipulated the interface. The human text appeared instantly in his native Zeltharian script, the translation so perfect it seemed to read his thoughts. The archive contained detailed analyses of Zeltharian mating rituals, Andromedan sleep cycles, even the deep cultural taboos of the notoriously secretive Void Dwellers. Information that should have been impossible for a primitive species to obtain, unless they hadn't been primitive at all. A new section opened, labeled simply Project Looking Glass. What Nate found there would haunt him for the rest of his considerably long life. The humans had been watching. For thousands of years, they had maintained hidden observation posts throughout the galaxy. Cloaked ships that moved undetected through Council space. Agents who lived among other species, their modified genetics allowing them to pass as natives. They had been studying the galactic community with the same methodical precision that Nate studied extinct civilizations. The recordings in this section were different. These showed humans as they truly were, not the carefully crafted image of primitive aggressors, but something far more unsettling. They were innovators, philosophers, artists whose creations made the greatest Galactic Council. Masterpieces looked like children's finger paintings. One recording showed a human composer conducting what she called a symphony of stars. The music was mathematical perfection given audible form, each note calculated to resonate with the harmonic frequencies of different stellar classifications. It was beauty that transcended species, beauty that rewrote the very definition of art. Another showed a human engineer designing what he casually referred to as a minor atmospheric processor. The device could terraform entire worlds in a matter of decades, technology that the Council had deemed impossible for another 10,000 years of development. But it was the philosophers who truly shattered Nate's understanding of reality. Human female named Lisa sat in what appeared to be a simple garden, speaking to an unseen audience about the nature of consciousness. Her words were profound enough that Nate had to pause the recording multiple times, overwhelmed by concepts that challenged everything he believed about existence, mortality, and the purpose of sentient life. She spoke of humanity's greatest discovery, not faster-than-light travel or quantum manipulation, but something they called empathetic resonance. The ability to truly understand another being's perspective so completely that the boundaries between self and other became meaningless. "We learned to love not just our own kind," Lisa said, her eyes reflecting a depth of wisdom that made Nate feel like a child, "but all conscious life. Every species, every individual, every unique perspective on existence. And in doing so, we discovered that consciousness itself is not bound by the physical forms we inhabit. We are all expressions of something greater, The recording ended with Lisa looking directly at the camera, as if she could see across time to whoever would eventually watch this moment. We know you'll find these archives someday. We left them for you for when the galaxy is ready to learn that diversity isn't something to be feared or controlled, but celebrated. When you're ready to understand that the universe is vast enough for all of us to flourish. Nate's hands shook as he accessed the final file in the section. It was labeled Current Status and dated only 50 years ago. His world collapsed. The humans weren't extinct. They were still out there, still watching, still protecting a galaxy that had tried to destroy them. The video showed human operatives preventing asteroid impacts, stopping plagues before they could spread between worlds, even intervening in wars to minimize casualties, all while maintaining perfect anonymity. They had become the galaxy's secret guardians, and no one had ever known. The implications were staggering. Every lucky break in galactic history, every disaster that had been narrowly averted, every moment when it seemed like the universe itself was conspiring to protect life, it had been them. Always them. Nate sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd discovered. The humans hadn't hidden because they were afraid. They had hidden because they loved too much to let the galaxy destroy itself. Engineer Vera Cal had built her reputation on solving impossible problems, but the human manufacturing facility on Sublevel 7 defied every principle of physics she'd ever learned. The machines were still running after 50,000 years, producing devices whose purpose remained completely mysterious. What terrified her wasn't their complexity, it was their elegance. Each piece of equipment appeared deceptively simple, built from materials that looked no different from standard galactic alloys. But when she ran detailed scans, the molecular structure revealed modifications so subtle they were almost artistic. The humans had rewritten the fundamental properties of matter at the atomic level, creating substances that shouldn't exist according to current scientific understanding. "Commander Vel," she called over the comm, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "You need to see this." The device she'd been examining appeared to be nothing more than a small metallic cube, no larger than her palm. But according to her instruments, it was generating enough clean energy to power a major city. The power source was completely contained within the cube itself, with no external connections or fuel requirements. Limitless, clean energy in a package smaller than a child's toy. The implications made her feel sick. The Galactic Council had been struggling with energy shortages for centuries. Entire wars had been fought over resource rights. Species had gone extinct because they couldn't adapt to energy-poor worlds, and the humans had solved the problem 50,000 years ago. "Vera," Reed's voice crackled through the comm from somewhere deeper in the facility. "I found their manufacturing logs. You're not going to believe this." The records he'd accessed showed production numbers that made no sense. Millions of energy cubes, atmospheric processors by the thousands, devices for water purification, soil enhancement, even weather control. The humans had been mass-producing solutions to problems that plague species across the galaxy, but the distribution logs were what made Vera's blood run cold. The devices had been secretly deployed throughout Council space, hidden on worlds experiencing ecological collapse, discreetly installed in failing infrastructure, anonymous donations to research facilities, struggling with unsolvable problems. Every major breakthrough in galactic science over the past 10,000 years had been based on technology that the humans had quietly provided. "They've been feeding us answers," Vera whispered. Slowly, carefully, making us think we were discovering these things ourselves. The next section of the manufacturing facility contained something even more disturbing: production lines for items that could only be described as toys. But these weren't playthings for human children. Each device was specifically designed for different alien species, incorporating behavioral and physiological data that suggested intimate knowledge of child development across hundreds of different Evolutionary paths. There were learning games for young Zeltharians that would help them develop their multi-limbed coordination. Musical instruments designed for the unique vocal range of Andromedan juveniles. Even complex puzzles suited to the crystalline thought patterns of the enigmatic silicon dancers. They were making gifts. Reed's voice carried an emotion that Vera couldn't identify. For children they'd never meet, of species that wanted them extinct. But it was the medical wing that finally broke Vera's composure entirely. The humans had been monitoring the health of every major population center in Council space. Real-time genetic analysis, disease prediction models, even psychological wellness. Assessments for species they'd supposedly never encountered. The medical databases contained cure templates for plagues that hadn't even evolved yet. Preventive treatments for genetic disorders specific to alien physiologies, and therapeutic protocols for mental health conditions that Council scientists had only recently recognized. They had been prepared to heal a galaxy that hated them. The final room contained something that made Vera sink to the floor in stunned silence. Thousands of message pods, each one addressed to a specific individual across the galaxy. The names were written in dozens of different languages, but somehow, impossibly, one of them was addressed to her. With trembling hands, she opened the pod labeled Engineer Vera Cal of the 32nd Exploratory Division. The message was simple, written in perfect Zeltharian script. Dear Vera, if you're reading this, it means you've found our archives and learned the truth about who we really were. We know this discovery must be overwhelming. We know it challenges everything you believed about history, about your own achievements, about the nature of civilization itself. Please don't think less of your people or any of the Council species. You've all accomplished remarkable things with the tools we provided. Our gifts were worthless without your wisdom to apply them, your courage to implement them, your compassion to use them for the betterment of all life. We've been watching you. Specifically, Vera, your work on the Kepler mining platforms saved 30,000 lives. The atmospheric recycling system you designed for the Outer Rim colonies has made life possible for countless families. You've used our tools to build a better galaxy. That was always the plan. We're still out here, still watching, still hoping that someday the galaxy will be ready for us to come home. Until then, know that every life you save, every problem you solve, every moment of joy you create, you do it with our blessing and our love. The universe is vast enough for all of us. With eternal gratitude. The Human Archive Project. Vera clutched the message to her chest and wept for a species she'd never met. For a love so profound it had shaped galactic history from the shadows. Captain Alex Zorn of the Galactic Security Division had built his career on maintaining order, but the Human Combat Archives had shattered his understanding of what it meant to be a warrior. The tactical displays surrounding him showed battle strategies so advanced, they seemed to bend the rules of engagement into entirely new forms. These weren't the savage, mindless conflicts that galactic history had recorded. These were symphonies of precision, campaigns designed not to destroy enemies, but to preserve as much life as possible while achieving strategic objectives. Sir, Corporal Bell's voice shook as she accessed another file. These aren't battle records, they're rescue missions. The recording showed human military units engaging in conflicts across the galaxy, but their primary objective was never conquest or domination. They were extracting non-combatants, providing medical aid to wounded enemies, and establishing safe corridors for civilian evacuation. Even in the heat of battle, they were saving lives. Every single engagement followed the same pattern: minimize casualties, protect the innocent, offer mercy to those who surrendered. Look at this, Bell whispered, highlighting a tactical analysis from a conflict on the Andromedan frontier. They had the enemy completely surrounded, overwhelming firepower advantage, and instead of pressing the attack, they negotiated. Spent 3 days in talks to find a solution that would let everyone go home. Alex studied the battle plan, his Military mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The humans had possessed weapons that could have ended the conflict in minutes. Energy weapons that could vaporize entire fleets. Kinetic bombardment systems that could crack planets. Even something called quantum disruptors that could erase matter at the subatomic level. Instead, they had chosen to fight with conventional weapons, accepting higher casualties among their own forces, rather than deploy anything that might cause excessive harm to their opponents. They were holding back, Alex realized. In every single engagement, they were deliberately limiting their own effectiveness to avoid excessive destruction. The human military doctrine was unlike anything in galactic history. Where other species focused on overwhelming force or tactical superiority, humans had developed what they called compassionate warfare strategies designed to achieve military objectives while preserving the maximum number of leaves on all sides. But it was the defensive records that truly revealed the scope of human capabilities. Hidden throughout the galaxy were defensive installations that had been protecting Council worlds for millennia. Asteroid deflection systems, plague containment fields, even massive gravity generators that had prevented stellar collapses. The humans had been quietly maintaining a defensive network that spanned the entire galaxy. "Sir," Bell's voice was barely audible. "The vegan crisis 16 years ago, when that rogue black hole was heading toward the core worlds." Alex remembered. The entire council had mobilized, but their combined efforts weren't enough to alter the black hole's trajectory. Then, impossibly, it had simply stopped, changed course. The official reports claimed it was a natural gravitational anomaly. The human records told a different story. A massive human installation, hidden in the void between galaxies, had fired something called a gravitational pulse cannon. The technology to create such a device was so far beyond current understanding that Alex couldn't even comprehend the energy requirements. The humans had saved billions of lives, and no one had ever known. "How many times?" Alex whispered. "How many disasters have they prevented?" The answer came in the form of a comprehensive threat assessment database. Gamma-ray bursts redirected away from inhabited systems. Plague ships intercepted before they could reach populated worlds. Even diplomatic interventions, with human agents working behind the scenes to prevent wars that would have claimed millions of lives. They had been the galaxy's invisible guardians for 50,000 years, but the most disturbing files were labeled extraction protocols. Detailed plans for evacuating entire populations from worlds facing extinction-level events. The logistics were staggering: hidden transport networks, supply caches, even temporary habitats prepared for species-specific physiological needs. They had been ready to save everyone, even those who wanted them dead. "Bell," Alex's voice was hoarse, "access the current threat assessment files." What they found made them both fall silent. The human monitoring systems were still active, still identifying potential dangers to galactic civilization. Solar flares that could cripple communication networks. Asteroid swarms on collision courses with inhabited worlds. Even sociological analyses predicting which political tensions might escalate into destructive conflicts. And for each threat, there were response plans. Detailed, ready to implement solutions that could save countless lives. The humans were still out there, still protecting a galaxy that had forced them into hiding. Alex stared at the final file in the military archives. Rules of engagement. Final protocol. When he opened it, he found a simple message. "To whoever finds these records, we know our disappearance must seem like abandonment. We know the galaxy has faced threats and challenges in our absence, but we never truly left. We simply learned to protect from the shadows, to serve without recognition, to love without expectation of return. If you're reading this, it means the time has come for truth. We trust you to use this knowledge wisely. We trust you to understand that strength without compassion is meaningless. that power without mercy is destruction, and that the greatest victory is not defeating your enemies, but turning them into friends. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us to flourish. We've been waiting for you to realize that. With hope for a better tomorrow. The Human Defense Corps, Alex Zorn, career soldier and keeper of galactic peace, broke down completely and sobbed for warriors he would never meet, who had redefined what it meant to fight for something worth protecting. Archivist Quinn Tam had spent her life cataloging the rise and fall of civilizations, but the human cultural archives in the deepest level of the facility contained something that defied every model of societal development she'd ever studied. These weren't the records of a species that had destroyed itself. They were the documentation of a civilization that had transcended itself. The cultural evolution displayed in the archives followed an impossible trajectory, where every other species had reached certain developmental bottlenecks: resource scarcity, ideological conflicts, technological stagnation. The humans had somehow navigated each crisis and emerged stronger. "Ma'am," Technician Luke called from across the massive archive chamber, "I think I understand why they hid." The files he'd accessed contained detailed psychological profiles of the major Galactic Council species, but these weren't clinical studies. They were written with the compassionate precision of beings who understood that every species had to find its own path to enlightenment, and that forcing evolution only led to destruction. The humans had recognized something that the Council had never acknowledged. Advanced civilizations weren't meant to interfere with younger species' development. They were meant to guide, protect, and inspire from a distance until those species were ready for true partnership. "They didn't disappear because they were afraid," Quinn whispered, the magnitude of the discovery washing over her. "They disappeared because they loved us too much to let us become dependent on them." The cultural records showed the internal debates that had shaped human policy for millennia. Philosophers, scientists, and leaders wrestling with the ethical implications of their advanced capabilities. They had possessed the power to solve every problem facing galactic civilization, but they had recognized that doing so would rob other species of the growth that came from overcoming challenges. Instead, they had developed what they called developmental guidance, subtle interventions that provided just enough assistance to prevent extinction-level disasters while allowing each species to find its own solutions. The files contain detailed case studies of their interventions. The Andromedan food crisis that had been solved by the accidental discovery of a new agricultural technique. The Zeltharian plague that had been cured when a naturally occurring antidote was found on a previously unexplored world. The Silicon Dancer philosophical renaissance that had begun after they, independently, developed concepts that the humans had been carefully introducing through mathematical proofs. Hidden in cosmic background radiation, every major advancement in galactic civilization had been guided by human hands, but implemented by each species' own efforts and wisdom. "Luke," Quinn's voice cracked with emotion, "access the files labeled Project Homecoming." What they found was a comprehensive plan for humanity's eventual return to galactic society. Not as conquerors or saviors, but as partners. The humans had been preparing for centuries, developing technologies and cultural frameworks that would allow for peaceful integration without disrupting the natural development of other species. They had been planning a future where all of galactic civilization could work together as equals. The final section of the archives contained something that made Quinn's hands shake as she accessed it. Personal messages from individual humans to the people who would eventually discover their truth. Thousands of videos, each one recorded by ordinary humans who would never see the galaxy they were protecting. Parents who wanted their children biological and adopted across species lines to know they were loved. Scientists sharing discoveries they would never be able to publish. Artists whose work would never be seen by the eyes it was meant to inspire. One message, recorded by an elderly human male, seemed to speak directly to Quinn. To whoever finds these archives, we know this must be overwhelming. Learning that everything you believed about history, about your own achievements, about the nature of civilization itself, has been guided by a species you thought was extinct. But please understand, nothing we gave you was unearned. Every breakthrough you achieved, every crisis you overcame, every moment of beauty you created, that was your wisdom, your courage, your love. We simply provided tools. You built the better galaxy. We've been watching you specifically. Quintam, your work preserving the cultural heritage of extinct species has been beautiful to witness. You've shown more respect for lost civilizations than most show for living ones. You understand that every species, no matter how different, has something valuable to contribute to the symphony of consciousness. That understanding is why we knew the galaxy would eventually be ready for us to come home. We're still out here, still hoping, still believing in a future where all conscious beings can work together to explore the infinite possibilities of existence. When that day comes, and we believe it will, we'll be ready to join you as partners, not as leaders or followers, but as family. The universe is vast enough for all of us, and together, we can make it even more beautiful than it already is. With infinite love and eternal hope, the Human Archive Project. As the message ended, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. But these weren't warning signals, they were welcome chimes. The archive was activating systems that had been dormant for millennia, sending a signal into the depths of space. Quinn realized with stunning clarity that their discovery hadn't been accidental. The humans had been waiting for the right people to find these archives at the right time. They had been waiting for a galaxy mature enough to handle the truth. On screens throughout the chamber, star charts began displaying incoming signatures. Ships were emerging from hidden locations across the galaxy, converging on known worlds. The humans were coming home. As Quinn watched the fleet positions update in real time, she felt a profound sense of completion. The greatest mystery in galactic history was about to become the greatest reunion. The universe was vast enough for all of them, and finally, they were all going to explore it together.